Hey guys, I'm Pastor Toby and this is What's New in New Heights for the week of June 1st. Wednesday nights are going to look a little bit different here for the next few weeks. We are giving our fantastic kitchen staff the summer off, but we know that some of y'all have a hard time getting here, so we are going to be pizza guys. It's going to be lots of fun. So there should be an order form in your email. Also, there's a QR code in the bulletin. If you want to scan that, you can order how many pizzas you want, pepperoni or cheese, and then Wednesday night you'll just pay for them when you get here at 5:45, and we will take care of all the other work for you so your family can have a little bit to eat this Wednesday. It's June, that means we are amping it up for summer in the student ministry. This Wednesday night at 6:30, we will be leaving the church and heading across the street to the Ellis's for our dive-in and devos, where I've already got a student lined up to give a devotional, and I'm so excited to hear what they have to say. They will be swimming, and then we'll be back by 7:45. So you guys don't have to do anything special. You can still go to your normal studies, and we will have a blast taking care of the rest. Then this Thursday at 9 o'clock, we're heading out for our first summer of service. We're going to head on over to Tiger Creek and do some errands for them and take care of some of the projects that they have lined up for us. I'll feed them lunch, and then again, swimming, because it's summer. We got to cool off somehow. And then I'll bring them back to the church at 4 o'clock that afternoon, and you just pick them up then. Then don't forget, we also got student camp coming up in just over 2 weeks away. I need you to sign up today if you haven't signed up, because I've got to place my t-shirt order, and I need you to do that so we can be ready for a great week at camp. I hope you guys are excited, because it's going to be awesome. All you seniors that are going on the Blue Ridge train ride need to be here at the church at 8:30 this Thursday, and you'll be going out, having a great time, having lunch, and be back at 5 o'clock. So if you have any questions, be sure to see Sandy Beck. She has all the answers that you need for this great senior outing. Join us June 8th for our Next Steps class. If you've been wanting to know what it means to be a member here at New Heights or want to join this crazy family, hey, come on out. We're going to serve you a great lunch, and then we're going to have a time to where we can share the mission and vision of the church, introduce you to some of the staff, and show you opportunities where you can serve. So if you have any questions, be sure to contact the church office. Come talk to Pastor Tom or myself, and we'll answer all your questions about what the Next Steps class is going to be like next Sunday on June 8th. God is good all the time, and we have all the volunteers we need for Vacation.
Stop by the welcome desk at the back, stop by on the way out, and they have a gift bag for you, and they'd like to get some information on you just so we can contact you, okay? The last 2 weeks we've been in the book of Daniel. We're going to actually doing about a 10-week series in the book of Daniel. So take your Bible, like we've done every other week, put it in your hand like this, and take about 2/3 of the pages, put them in your left thumb, about 1/3 of the pages, put them in your right thumb, and open it up, and you should be in the major prophets, somewhere around Isaiah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, or Daniel, somewhere in there. We're going to be in Daniel 3 this morning, and we've been having a key word for every single chapter. 2 weeks ago, we were in Daniel 1, and the key word, anybody know what the key word was for Daniel 1? It's right on the screen. Conviction, right. The key word for Daniel 2 was what? Thrones. The key word for chapter 3 is what? Fiery. Say it with me. Fiery. Give it a little attitude. Fiery. Good, good. There are a lot of different emotions and sensations you associate with fire. Okay, like you could think of athletics, like the UT softball team was on fire Friday night in their game, okay? Or it could come from the passion of a preacher. That's a fiery preacher. Or that guy has a fiery personality. You could associate it with something that is on fire, like a house, which is not a good thing to associate with, but you could do that. You could associate it with a trial. We know a family that's really going through a fire right now in their family, something like that. There's all kinds of ways you could use the word fire. I used to be scared to death of fire when I was being raised because my mom had explained to me that if I left the iron on, the house would burn down. I would dream about that. It scared me. Before we move on and look at how we're going to see fire in this passage, I want us to look at the outline of the book of Daniel. Part 1 is the personal history of Daniel. That's chapter 1, and that was written in Hebrew. We're done with that part. Part 2 is the prophetic history of the Gentiles. That's chapter 2 through 7, and that was written in Aramaic. Part 3 is the prophetic history of Israel, and that's chapters 8 through 12, and that was written again in Hebrew. So different languages for different people that it's talking about and addressing. This chapter is so great. I had so much fun studying Daniel chapter 3 this week. And I've heard the fiery furnace all my life. I was raised as a preacher's kid. They say that doctor's sons get sick for nothing, dentist's sons have teeth for nothing, and preacher's sons are good for nothing. It was true in my life. But I remember the fiery furnace from when I was just a little kid. But we're going to have fun with this chapter today. Let's pray before we get into it. Lord, as we open your word this morning to Daniel 3, God, may we understand that sometimes you allow us to go through the fire. Help us today to realize, dear Lord, that you never allow us to go through the fire without coming with us. You're with your children in the fire. Lord, this morning, as we watch the example of 3 Hebrew young men who would not say yes to the world's cancel culture, to the conceited king, or to the caustic crowd, dear Lord, they said yes to you. Thank you for them. Thank you for the example. And God, even if you take us into a fire, help us to remember and to have the resilience and the commitment and the conviction to trust you, because you will be there with us. For in Jesus' name we do pray. Amen. Last week we saw the statue of Nebuchadnezzar. It's a tall statue, and it had different sections in it. It had a head of gold, which represented Nebuchadnezzar and the Babylonian Empire. It had chest and arms of silver, which represented the Persian Empire. It had stomach and thighs that were bronze, which represented the Greek Empire. It had legs of iron, which represented the Roman Empire. And then the feet were made of clay and iron, representing individual nations that would come after that. Some strong nations, some weak nations. So we've met King Nebuchadnezzar in the last 2 weeks. But today, as you look at the drama of Daniel, and you look at the 2 major players, one is Daniel and one is Nebuchadnezzar. Now, the guys we're going to look to today had kind of minor roles. Matter of fact, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego are not mentioned after today's passage in Daniel. But they have a role in this book too. As we jump into chapter 3, let me tell you how you should remember King Nebuchadnezzar. Okay, first of all, he was known as a great builder. He possessed an enormous command over human labor. Everybody he brought in the kingdom, he found out their talent, he put them to work. 90% of all the ruins in the former Babylonian Empire are composed of bricks stamped with his name. You see an example on the screen behind me. His inscriptions gave an elaborate account of the immense works which he constructed. He was credited with the famous Hanging Gardens. You ever heard of the Hanging Gardens? He was credited with those. So you ought to look at those. It's incredible. King Nebuchadnezzar transformed the city of Babylon into the envy of the ancient world. And perhaps the most famous structure built by Nebuchadnezzar is the famous Ishtar Gate, which was really tall, bigger than any other gate. It was golden. It had striking blue bricks. It had the images of dragons and bulls, and the sheer size of the gate awed the modern world ever since it was discovered. He was also known as a brutal, powerful, ambitious, conquering king. He was strong. Nebuchadnezzar's ruthlessness is evident in Daniel and 2 Kings, where he is seen as a conqueror who destroyed Jerusalem and took everybody with him back to Babylon. He's known for his violent actions, including the siege of Jerusalem, the looting of the temple, and carrying off skilled workers to Babylon. As a show of his power, he loved to burn things down. His army burned down the temple of Solomon. They burned down the royal palace of David. They burned all the houses of Jerusalem. They burned all the leadership's houses of Jerusalem. Archaeological investigations reveal that the majority of towns surrounding Jerusalem and all along the western frontier were destroyed by fire. Nebuchadnezzar did that. But not only was he a ruthless leader, not only was he a great builder, he was a proud, temperamental, vengeful king. I'm sure it made him proud when last week we looked at that huge statue and Daniel looked at Nebuchadnezzar and he said, "O king, you are the head of gold." I think that went to his mind. And I think he started thinking about that. And I think he said, if I'm the head of gold, I'm going to be gold. So he made a huge statue that would represent him. Not only would it represent him, he would have everybody bow down to this huge statue. It was going to be a statue of gold. Let's look at Daniel chapter 3, verses 1 to 3. Read a few verses here. King Nebuchadnezzar made a gold statue 90 feet tall, 9 feet wide, and set it up on the plain of Dura in the province of Babylon. Then he sent messages to the high officers, the officials, the governors, the advisors, the treasurers, the judges, the magistrates, all officials, to come to the dedication of the statue he had set up. So all of these officials came and stood before the statue and King Nebuchadnezzar. Let's talk about this. The plain of Dura would be where y'all are. And this plain would go for miles and miles and miles. And behind me, if I was, say, on the platform where Nebuchadnezzar stood, behind me would be a 90-foot high statue. Hey, this roof up here is 40 feet high. So it's about twice as high, over twice as high as this auditorium. Over to the right of me, or the left for you, the left, over here somewhere will be a fiery furnace, a kiln, where they put all the gold in and melted it down so they could make this incredibly high statue. This statue was made of gold. And that's what it was like. Can you imagine the sun setting on a golden statue? Or the sun rising on a golden statue? How shiny that would be. And by the way, this was the desert. It was quite a feat. The text doesn't say that Nebuchadnezzar sent invitations. It says that he summoned people to come to this incredible festival he was going to have honoring himself. They were given a message, show up. This included all the high officers, all the officials, the governors of the different territories, the advisors, the treasurers, the judges, the magistrates, everybody who was anybody. Come to this festival in honor of my statue. The agenda was, well, it was going to be a worship service. It was going to be a worship service for Nebuchadnezzar. As a matter of fact, in this chapter, worship is mentioned 11 times. Let's read a couple of verses 4 to 6, Daniel 3, 4 to 6. Then a herald shouted out, people of all races and nations and languages, listen to the king's command. When you hear the sound of the horn, the flute, the zither, the lyre, the harp, the pipes, and other musical instruments, bow down to the ground to worship the king, Nebuchadnezzar's gold statue. Anyone who refuses to obey will immediately be thrown into a blazing furnace. That's my radio voice. I was thinking about that band. This is a weird band. Look at the instruments in this band. You've got the zither, which is like an auto harp or a dulcimer. You've got the horns. That's easy enough to remember. The flutes. You've got the bagpipes, okay? You've got harps. You've got an incredible array of different sounds all playing at the same time. We lived in Scroon Lake, New York for about 5 years, and the biggest thing in that town of about 2,000, was the July 4th parade. And on the July 4th parade, there would be about 10,000 people show up. They would have an incredible patriotic rally, and this parade would go for hours. And they had a lot of bagpipe bands. Anybody play bagpipes here? I hope not. Oh, somebody does play bagpipes. Just wondering. I don't really like the sound of bagpipes, just so you know, okay? It's not my favorite instrument. But they would come out, the bagpipes. So I'm thinking, what would this band sound like? Maybe Eastern, maybe like an Eastern band. You're thinking about maybe in India or Persia or somewhere like that. When Nebuchadnezzar's band began, though, it was the sign that everybody was instructed to bow down. So at the sound of the musical instruments, all the people, whatever their race or nation or language, bowed to the ground and worshiped the gold statue that King Nebuchadnezzar had set up. Everybody bowed down, except for 3 guys: Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Now, they looked pretty conspicuous for several reasons. Number one, everybody else was bowed down. Number two, they had the robes from the palace on because they worked for the king. Number three, they were Hebrews. They were Jews. And just read through the Bible. From the beginning of the Bible, all through the Bible, the Gentiles didn't like the Jews. There's always been anti-Semitism in our world. The anti-God world has been against God's chosen people, the Jews, for all of history. With that in mind, let me give you the outline for this chapter, because this tells you what happens. Letter A, they would not bow, verses 1 to 12. The three Hebrews showed devotion. Letter B, they would not bend, verses 13 to 18. The three Hebrews acted with conviction. Letter C, they would not burn, verses 19 to 30. The three Hebrews trusted in God's protection. Now, I don't know about you, but I like motions. Do you like motions? We're going to have some motions. So why put your hands like this? Come on. One. It's awkward, isn't it? Number one, they wouldn't bow. Okay? Keep your hands up. Number two, they wouldn't bend. Okay? Number three, they wouldn't burn. That's fire. Do the fire. Okay, ready? One more time. Number one, they wouldn't bow. Number two, they wouldn't bend. Number three, they wouldn't burn. Now, see, you can remember that. Every time you read Daniel 3, you'll think of that. But now there's something we have to put in the script. It's dun, dun, dun. You want to do that with me? Ready? Dun, dun, dun. Because the rat patrol goes to the king, and they report a terrible breakdown in behavior. It was the astrologers, by the way, the same astrologers that couldn't solve the king's dream in the last chapter. They go to the king, and they say, King, is it true that you said when the music plays, everyone has to bow down? That's my voice for those guys. And King, isn't it true that you said when the music plays, if they don't bow down, they will be thrown into the fiery furnace? The king said, yeah, that's right. What's up? Well, King, you need to know that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, whom you have put in charge of the province of Babylon, did not bow down. They don't respect you. They don't worship your gold statue. Think about it now. Here's these three young Hebrew men. Hey, think of what they didn't do. They didn't start a rebellion. They didn't have a demonstration. They didn't picket with signs. They didn't start a chant, we won't bow down. We won't bow down. They didn't rant on Facebook. They just simply didn't bow down. They just did what was right. Why didn't they bow down? Because God had distinctly told them, commanded the Jews to bow only to one God, the true God. You see, in that culture, the Babylonians had many gods, so they could bow down to a lot of gods. They could bow down to the king and to their god at the temple of their whatever their temple was, and to another god, whatever gods they wanted to, they could bow down to. But not the Jews. The first commandment of the 10 commandments was, you shall have no other gods before me. And the second commandment was, you shall make no idols. That brings us to our second point in the outline. These young men showed great conviction. They said, we won't bend. Now, we already know that King Nebuchadnezzar is a proud, temperamental, angry king. So King Nebuchadnezzar did exactly what angry kings do when they get angry. He flew into a rage. His sovereignty was being challenged. He said, you bring those scoundrels to me right now. So Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were brought to the king. The king said, is it true that you refuse to serve my gods or to worship the great statue that I've made? Didn't you hear the music? I'm going to give you one more chance. You know what? They didn't take their second chance. He said, when the music plays, if you don't bow down, you'll be thrown into the blazing furnace. King Nebuchadnezzar now challenged, listen, he now challenged the same God that he bowed down to in the last chapter, right? Here's what he said. He said, what God will be able to rescue you from my power? That's pretty arrogant and pretty presumptuous. The key verses in this chapter are verses 16 to 18. I love these verses. Let's read them. Verses 16 to 18. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego replied, O Nebuchadnezzar, we do not need to defend ourselves before you. If we are thrown into the blazing furnace, the God whom we serve is able to save us. He will rescue us from your power and your majesty. Oh, your power, your majesty. But if he doesn't, we want to make it clear to you, your majesty, that we will never serve your gods or worship the gold statue you have set up. They were respectful. They realized that he was the king, but they had a higher king. In verse 16, the three Hebrews said, we don't need to make a defense. We're absolutely committed to our God. They didn't need to know what was about to happen, and they didn't care what was about to happen. They just obeyed God. In verse 17, not only are we absolutely committed to God, we are absolutely confident that our God can deliver us. That's what they said. It's an amazing verse when you get to verse 18. I love verse 18. It says, but even if he doesn't deliver us, think about that phrase, even if he doesn't deliver us, we want to make it clear, King, that we are absolutely content to obey him no matter what. Can I just say to God's church here at New Heights that what we need as a church is believers that will say, I am absolutely committed to doing what God says, no matter what everybody else thinks, no matter what it is. I'm absolutely confident that God is able to deliver me no matter what the circumstances. We need church members that will say, I am still committed to the will of God in my life, no matter what the outcome. You see, these three young Hebrews didn't have a little God. We're passing out little Jesuses. I just ordered a bunch of them. I'm going to give them out with my cards that I give out to people. I went up to somebody at a Chick-fil-A the other morning and put one of my cards down on their table and put a little Jesus there and said, I'm the pastor of New Heights Baptist Church. I'd love to have you guys come. They just picked up the Jesus and walked off with it. Forget my card, you know. But these guys didn't have a little Jesus. They didn't have a little God. They didn't have a medium-sized God. They had a big God. Can you say it with me? Big God. Say it mean, big God. Right. You heard Terrian's song about that? It's a great song. Their God was the God that created the world in Genesis 1. Their God was the God that led the children of Israel across the Red Sea, through the Red Sea on dry land. Their God was the God of Joshua who led the children into the promised land. Their God was the God that made the walls of Jericho fall down. Their God was the God that allowed David to kill the giant with one stone right to the head. They had a big God. So let me ask you a question, church. How big is your God? Can you trust your God? Can you trust it even in the ifs of life? God, I'm praying for healing, but even if I don't get healing, I'm still going to trust you. God, I'm praying for a better job, but even if I don't get a better job, I'm going to be faithful to you where I am. God, I'm praying that I get that promotion, but even if I don't get that promotion, God, I'm going to be faithful to you. God, I'm praying for a special friend, but even if I don't have a special friend, God, I'm going to be trusting in you. God, I'm praying for victory over whatever you need victory over. But even if I fall, God, you're still my God, and I'll come back to you, and I'll get back on my feet, and I'll confess my sin, and I'll move on. So what is the even if in your life that you haven't been able to give to God? I read this week that the first rule of the spiritual life is God is God, and we are not. You see, this only works if God is God, because you can't be your own God. Psalm 115:3 says, our God is in the heaven, and he does whatever he pleases. Romans 8:28, you know that verse. We know that all things, that God causes everything to work together for the good of those who love God and are called according to his purpose for them. That brings us to the third point in our outline. Because they were trusting in God for protection, they wouldn't burn. They put God to the test, and they didn't burn. Look at verse 19. Nebuchadnezzar was so furious with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego that his face became distorted with rage. He commanded that the furnace be heated 7 times hotter than usual. Now, I want you to look at the person beside you and give them your angry face. Just look at them in your angry face, okay? Hey, don't use that face to your kids, okay? And probably shouldn't use it to your spouse. By the way, angry leaders like Nebuchadnezzar hurt everyone around them, and they don't care who they hurt. The collateral damage is great. People don't recover from the consequences of anger. So they end up being served by people who are afraid of them, intimidated by them, and deeply hurt by them. So if you're a spouse, a parent, a supervisor, a manager, a company executive, don't lead out of anger. Be filled with the Spirit. Be kind, be gentle, be loving. That's why our mission statement says that we strive to represent Christ not only in word but in action, because if we try to represent Christ in action but we don't do it in word, we aren't doing it at all. Watch your anger. Let's move on. King Nebuchadnezzar's really mad now, so he commands that the furnace be heated 7 times hotter than usual. Then he ordered some of the strongest men of his army to bind them and throw them into the fire. He got really strong men that could throw these guys a long way, but he didn't get strong enough men because they couldn't throw far enough. And these men tied them up and threw them into the furnace fully dressed. And it says in verse 22 and 23, because the king, in his anger, had demanded such a hot fire in the furnace, the flames killed the soldiers as they threw the 3 men in. So Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, securely tied, fell into the roaring flames. John MacArthur in his commentary said this, I love this. The king had boasted that no God could save Daniel's friends from his hand, but the truth was that the king could not save his own men from the hand of God. That's good, isn't it? Here's where it really gets good. You thought, this has been good all the time. Well, it has. It's the Bible. But listen to this. Suddenly, Nebuchadnezzar jumped up in amazement. He goes, ah! My wife and I have this little thing. We do that with our dog. We go, ah! The dog jumps up and looks around, you know. Sorry about that. I shouldn't do that to our dog, but we do. The king said, ah! Jumped up in amazement and exclaimed to his advisors, didn't we tie up 3 men and throw them into the furnace? Yes, your majesty, we certainly did, they replied. Look, Nebuchadnezzar shouted, I see 4 men, unbound, walking around in the fire, unharmed, and the 4th looks like God. Wow. Then Nebuchadnezzar came as close as he could to the door of the flaming furnace, and he shouted, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, servants of the Most High God, come out, come here. So Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego stepped out of the fire. That is so cool. Now they're servants of the Most High God, right? Well, I want you to remember a combination. Here's a combination. 3, 4, 3. Can you make your fingers work that good? Do it with me. 3, 4, 3. One more time. 3, 4, 3. Here's the deal. 3 men went into the fire. 4 men were walking around in the fire. And when King asked them to come out, 3 men came out of the fire. I believe the 4th man was what we would call a Christophany, a pre-incarnate appearance of Jesus Christ himself in human form in the furnace. When you need God the most, folks, he's there. He's with you. I don't know if those 3 young men even saw Christ in that furnace. I really don't. But I can tell you he was there. God allowed Nebuchadnezzar to build the fire. God allowed the Hebrews to be thrown into the fire. God walked with them in the fire. God brought them through the fire. And they stepped out of the fire. When I studied for this message, I thought about our firemen in our church and our policemen in our church. We've got Brian Mangum and Rylan Ellis and Clay Ellis and Jared Wingington. Firemen. Any other firemen here? Those are firemen. They all go to our church. We've got policemen like John Robbs, not here this morning, he was here last week. John Robbs and Veronica Thomas back there. Policemen and firemen. Isn't it comforting for y'all, the policemen and firemen, to know that when you arrive on the scene and you have to run at the fire or run at the incident, God is with you. You have that comfort. Some of you teenagers are getting ready to go away to college. God will go with you. You have surgery scheduled in the next month. God will be with you in that surgery. Look at the miracles here. First of all, the men didn't get burned at all. Secondly, whatever was binding their arms and feet burned off without singeing them. Thirdly, their hair wasn't singed. They looked better than me. Fourthly, their clothes weren't scorched. Fifthly, listen, I love this. They didn't even smell like smoke. So we have a fire pit behind our house, and a few months ago, we had the group from Word of Life here singing, and all the girls stayed at our house. They wanted to go make a fire and grill out hot dogs and marshmallows and things like that. And we sent them all down there with a bunch of food. They put the fire, built the fire. They were out there till midnight, just sitting around the fire and having fun and singing and stuff. And they came back in. The next morning I got up and our whole house smelled like fire, just from them sitting by the fire. But these guys, they didn't even smell like fire. So at the end of this chapter, we see King Nebuchadnezzar at the same place he was at the end of chapter 2, when he realized that God had given him the dream and that Daniel could interpret it. Here's what he said in verse 28. Then Nebuchadnezzar said, "Praise to the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. He sent his angel to rescue his servants who trusted in him. They defied the king's command and were willing to die rather than serve or worship any god except their own God." This is Nebuchadnezzar saying this. They made an impression. This proud king is now humbled. He was humbled in chapter 3 also. And you'll see what happens to him in chapter 4. But for now, he's humbled. And he made a new decree in verse 29. He said, "Therefore, I make this decree. If any people, whatever their race or nation or language, speak a word against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they will be torn limb from limb, and their houses will be turned into heaps of rubble. There is no other God who can rescue like this God." Now, this is the same proclamation he made in the last chapter about to the wise men if they couldn't tell him his dream. He said, "You're going to be torn limb from limb and turned into heaps of rubble." He must have liked to do that to people. But the tone of this decree tells me a couple of things about Nebuchadnezzar. Number one, he's humbled, but he's not changed. Okay? You say, "How do you know that, Tom?" Well, the way that he admits that there is no God like the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. In other words, there are lots of gods, but there's none like your God. He's still not admitting that the God of creation is the only wise God. He doesn't believe that the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego is not just another God among other gods. He doesn't believe that he's the King of kings, the Lord of lords, the creator God of the universe, the one and only God. The Bible says the Lord our God is one Lord. And as we get to the end of the chapter, these guys are given raises. They're giving a higher position in the kingdom, and they're rewarded for their faith. I just want to close by doing two things. First of all, I want to tell you about 5 missionaries who went to reach the Auca Indians on January 8, 1956. Their names were Jim Elliot, Nate Saint, Ed McCulley, Peter Fleming, Roger Udaridan. And they boarded a small airplane and took off for the jungles of Ecuador. They were on Operation Auca, trying to find a way to reach the Auca tribe that had never heard of God. This tribe were headhunters and warriors. They had been flying there for months, sending down gifts in a bag. They would drop the bag, and there would be all kinds of gifts in it. They would send food. They would send all kinds of things. Finally, they thought the Indians had softened. Now, when they went, their wives and children were all back at the missionary base. They were all married. I have a picture here of some of the wives, some of the kids, and there's the picture of the plane. As soon as they got out of their plane, the Indians attacked them and speared them to death. The news of their deaths was broadcast around the world. Life magazine covered the event with a photo essay. One of the missionaries, Jim Elliot, had written in his diary a few days before the project, "He is no fool who gives what he cannot keep to gain what he cannot lose." Look at that quote. He is no fool who gives what he cannot keep to gain what he cannot lose. You know, folks, serving Jesus may cost you something. It's not always easy. It may cost you a job. It may cost you a friend. It may cost you some money, but it's worth it. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego said, "We're going to live our life with devotion. We're going to live it with great conviction. We know that God is going to be on hand doing his work of protection, so we won't bow down, we won't bend, we won't burn." I just want to take 3 words and make them the application. And here they are. I guess it's just 2 words. Even if. Even if. Even if I have to give up something, I'm going to serve God. Even if it doesn't turn out like I wanted it to, I'm going to serve God. 1 Peter 4:12-14 says, Dear friends, don't be surprised at the fiery trials you're going to go through as if something strange happened to you. Instead, be very glad, for these trials make you partners with Christ in His suffering, so that you will have the wonderful joy of seeing His glory when it is revealed to all the world. We sent our son and his wife and their 8 kids off to Indonesia, December 29th. And we have confidence that God is with them. We are confident that they're doing God's work. We are confident that God can protect them. And we are confident that we'll see them again. But even if they were to die on the field, that's okay, because God's in charge and God's using them. And God will use that event, if there is an event like that, to bring people to Himself. I want to close this message today by being very honest with you. I can't promise that if you follow God with all your heart, you won't have to face the fire. I can't promise that. The fact is, sometimes we create our own fire. We create it with the things we do. And we have to walk through it because of bad choices. But God comes and walks with us. Sometimes God creates the fire and allows us to walk into it. But He's always there walking with us. Sometimes Satan creates the fire and God allows us to move into Satan's fire. But make no mistake about it, whatever fire you're in, God is there with you. And even if that fire doesn't end the way you envision, God is still good. Well, we sang that this morning. Thank God He used that fire in His own way for His own glory and for our ultimate good. Because when you stand before God, your works are going to be judged, and so as by fire. This week, as I was studying for this message, I thought of a song, and I want to play that song for you. It's 3.5, 4 minutes long, but I want you to watch this song. The lyrics will be up here, and I want this song to speak to you like it spoke to me this week. It's an incredible song. Just follow along on the words, and then we'll have the invitation hymn. Okay? Let's watch it.